due process of law.
The Sixth Amendment assures a right to trial.
The Sixth Amendment assures a right to trial.
And the Policy Committees Act,
Then the Policy Committees Act,
enforced since the Civil War,
and enforces the Civil War,
prohibits the domestic deployment of the military.
and prohibits the domestic employment of the military.
Democracy relies on these principles.
Relies on these principles.
A society is not free.
The society is not free.
Citizens are subject.
We citizens are subject.
Arbitrary,
Arbitrary.
indefinite, detention without trial.
Detention without trial.
NDAA's
The NDAA,
provisions
attention provisions,
would authorize indefinite military detention of activists
indefinite military detention of activists.
under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act
Under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act
and the material support provisions
and the material support provisions
of the Patriot Act,
of the Patriot Act,
upheld by the Supreme Court
upheld by the Supreme Court
and Humanitarian Law Project,
and Humanitarian Law Project,
its holder,
Mrs. Holder,
the FBI and other law enforcement agencies
the FBI and other law enforcement agencies
have long treated peace, environmental, and anti-tax activists as terrorists,
and anti-tax terrorists,
legalizing indefinite detention
legalizing indefinite detention
for anyone accused
for anyone
of
accused
a terror-related crime,
or a terror-related crime,
would give any future
would give any future
federal
government
the unchecked power
the unchecked power
to silence critics,
to silence critics,
deny the right to trial,
deny the right to trial,
and override the presumption of innocence.
and override the presumption of innocence.
The NDAA's
The NDAA
detention provisions
undermine
national security.
national security.
The FBI director,
The FBI Director,
Secretary of Defense,
Secretary of Defense,
Director of National Intelligence,
the Director of National Intelligence,
chairs of the Senate Intelligence
and the chairs of the Senate Intelligence
and Judiciary Committees
and Judiciary Committees
all recognize
all
that
recognize
expanded military detention
that expanded military detention
harms national security.
harms national security.
Even President Obama had serious reservations
has serious reservations
about signing the bill
about signing the bill
and initially opposed it.
and initially opposed it.
They understand
They understand
that detention
that detention
would threaten constitutional rights,
would threaten constitutional rights,
force the military to perform a mission
to perform a mission
for which it is ill-suited,
and
erode trust
erode trust
in our justice system.
in our justice system.
Military detention without trial
Military detention without trial
removes courts
removes courts
from the system,
from the system,
checks and balances. Our nation's founders wrote expressly about the necessary role
about the necessary role
of independent judges
of independent judges
to prevent
to prevent
executive branch abuses.
executive branch abuses.
By authorizing
Military detention
beyond the reach of federal courts,
beyond the reach of federal courts,
NDAA
the NDAA
roads the separation of powers,
as
well as the individual rights, the due process and trial.
of due process and trial.
The detention provisions
The detention provisions
became law
because our policy process
has been hijacked.
The NDAA
The NDAA
passed
that a single congressional hearing
without a single congressional hearing
over the objections
and over the objections
of congressional committees
that
were denied a chance to review it. You, major media outlets,
You, major media outlets,
covered the debate
over the
NDAA's
NDAA
detention provisions.
and
Many members of Congress
many members of Congress
didn't even understand the bill
didn't even understand the bill
when they voted for it.
when they voted for it.
What's new? The NDAA's
The NDAA's
detention provisions invite the recurrence of torture. Because torture of military detainees has often gone unpunished. The military detention regime extended by the NDAA opens the door for more torture in the future. In fact, impunity for torture is one reason the NDAA passed. Officials responsible for torture under the Bush administration who are free only because the Obama administration has turned a blind eye to their war crimes. Actively lobbied in favor of the NDAA's detention provision, transforming the United States into a police state. Does not work. Excuse me. Does the work of our nation's enemies. If our race to protect ourselves from enemies undermines our own rights and liberties, we have done our enemies' work for them. Congress is supposed to check and balance the executive branch, not expand it. The NDAA any future administration unprecedented power to detain U.S. citizens without judicial review. Rather than checking and balancing the executive branch and its many ongoing violations of civil rights. Congress passed a bill giving the executive branch even more unchecked power.
We say no way. We say no way. NDAA. We say no way. We say no way. NDAA. We say no way. We say mic check. Let's
take this message to the House of Congress.
Let's march.
Now marching to Congress.
Mic check. Peace, justice, and democracy.
In Burma.
And America. Justice for Aung San Suu Kyi. Solidarity. Keep it up, guys.